Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is finally here. 4 months in the making, and the GMMK Pro from Glorious Gaming Race is ready to be assembled. I have obviously the keyboard itself, the bare bones keyboard itself. I have Gateron blue switches and keycaps, and we are good to go. So let's get started. Alright, so the GMMK Pro is basically baby's first mechanical keyboard build, because you've decided that you maybe want to kind of get into, I don't know, building your own keyboard and a little bit more than we can buy off the shelf, especially with Corsair or Razer, and maybe you're ready to go past just, buying a more niche brand like Vortex or Ducky. So what this is basically a bare bones keyboard frame that you put your own switches and keycaps on and call it a day. It's very simple and sort of like an introductory phase for, as I said, for people who don't necessarily want to go through, picking out all the specific parts and framing for it and everything, or have to worry about soldering onto a PCB, etc. So Glorious Gaming Race has done some very easy things, or some very smart things rather, with this device, with this keyboard, with this product and everything, to make it very, very beginner friendly. So if you're looking to get into the hobby a little bit more, this is probably the way to go. Again, not paid, but I just seriously like the design. So perhaps the biggest thing that helps with this is, as I alluded to earlier, the lack of soldering needed. This has a hot swappable design with gasket mounted switches, so that you can literally, as you're playing a game, pop out your switch and pop another one back in. Not that you would probably want to do that, but my point being that it is very, very easy to put your own switches into this thing, no matter which ones you desire. Or if you decide down the road that you want to maybe switch up your switches. No reaction? Okay. Maybe you decide down the road that you want to switch up your switches or something, then it's easy to just pull these out, or pull whatever ones you put in out, and then put the new ones in. And those are a lot cheaper than just having to buy a new keyboard if you want to try a different switch. So there is a lot of value to having, a sort of modular switch design like this. Furthermore, by building your own keyboard like this, it gives you a little bit more customizability as to what you can do. So for example, I chose just uniform Gateron blue switches, but say what some people do is, use WASD, might use a more linear switch for those buttons, because those are what you move in games with primarily, but then keep the rest of the board, maybe like a brown switch or a blue switch or even a black switch, something that's better for typing on the rest of the keyboard. But the world is your oyster. So you know what, let's just go ahead and get started building this thing. So, obviously, we have to check out what's in the box first and, actually get the keyboard frame out. So we're going to go ahead and open it up. And you're greeted with these little sort of like entry tile note cards. This is a foil sticker, pretty cool. Nice foam padding on top. And then, straight to the chase, here is the board itself.
Straight to the case.
Hey! Wrapped in nice little styro here. We'll talk about this later, but really quick go over the other goodies in the box. So these look like little dampening pads to go under the mount, or rather under the stabilizers and everything. Glorious has automatically installed their own goat stabilizers in the board already, and they are supposedly pre-lubed, so we'll check that out later. And then this little orange device here is a Keycap Puller. We'll keep that out. So this is the little orange Keycap Puller that we'll use for keycaps later, obviously, in case I screw up. Then this little metal device is very similar to a Keycap Puller in terms of looks and design, but isn't. This is the switch puller. And so if I ever screw up, putting in a switch, I need to take it out, use this little device here. Then we're given a white braided cable. It's probably white to match the board because we got the white model. And screws, spare mounting screws for stabilizers. It's always nice to have. So yeah, that's all the contents of the box. But we, of course, have to get to the keyboard itself. Alright, so the glorious PC gaming race GMMK Pro keyboard is a colloquially known as a 75% 83 key keyboard. Technically 82 keys, just they count the knob, so that's +1 to make 83, but I digress. So it's a little bit larger than, a 60% layout like the Razer Huntsman Mini that we reviewed on this channel also, and it's also going to be a bit smaller than, a 10 keyless, especially with this factor, as well as obviously a full-size keyboard. So this is I think this is a very popular sort of size for keyboards, and it's a really happy medium for people, especially just getting into the hobby, because they don't have to deal with a lot of the double or triple key actions that a 60% might have. You still have things like a full function row, etc. And part of things like home, print screen, etc. Anyway, moving on. This GMMK Pro comes in either what they call an ice white or I think graphite black, but this is more of a silver color, obviously. Although the PCB is nice and shiny and white, presumably the PCB on the black version is black as well to match that. Furthermore, I also have an aluminum backplate that I got primarily to match the color of the rest of the board and everything. You can get, when you order it, you can choose whether or not you want the aluminum backplate like I have, a brass backplate, which is this, well, obviously a brass color, they don't paint it or anything, or a polycarbonate backplate. Again, I opted for the aluminum backplate just for the color to match uniform throughout, although I would have probably preferred getting the brass backplate just because it provides a more solid typing experience. Finally, some last housekeeping things about the keyboard. It sits at a standard 6-degree angle and connects via USB-C. And this is exactly how it comes out of the box. You don't need to worry about putting the frame on, screwing anything in, etc. It is ready to go out of the box. All you need is switches and keycaps, and you are good to go. You are all set with a fantastic mechanical keyboard. And for what it's worth, also, the GMMK Pro punches in at a price point of around $170 just for this itself. And then you add on maybe around $30 to $35 for a set of switches for it, depending on which ones you go with. Could be cheaper, could be a little bit less. And then let's call it between $50 to $100 for a nice keycap set, although you can certainly go cheaper if you so desire and whatnot. And you're looking at a price of, let's just call it $280 or so, like between $280 to $300 total put together price. This is a very competitive price point, considering that a lot of other sort of like mechanical keyboard kits on the market aren't quite as beginner friendly, but also cost upwards of $300 and sometimes even go as high as $550. So this is a very competitive price point for this keyboard where it punches in at, but that's enough of me talking about it, so let's just get into actually building it. Alright, so the switches I picked out for this build are the Gateron Blues, and they are very similar to Cherry MX Blues, but after researching quite a bit of stuff, Gateron is just providing a little bit more of a refinement to the experience. So I was like, you know what, I've only ever really used Cherry or Kali or Razer switches now, so let's switch it up, go Gateron. So, get back, pull the switches. These are all the switches. These are $120 and $35 that you can also order off of Glorious's website. That's kind of convenient because you can pretty much part out everything you need for your keyboard in just one order on Glorious's website, which is nice. But again, you don't have to go through Glorious if you don't want to for the other parts of your board. You can go through like mechanicalkeyboards.com or KBD Fans, etc. Let's go over a couple of things before we put the switches in. So this is what's called a plate-mounted board and everything, which means when you go to get switches for it, you're going to need to get plate-mounted switches. Okay, this is very easy. Okay, to put in, it's just because it avoids soldering, but again, just make sure you get the right kind of switch for whatever sort of board you have. Again, if you're doing the GMK Pro route, make sure you get plate mountable switches. So if you look at the keyboard, the part that's beneath the backplate is the PCB. This is the more opaque white port on this particular board. You'll see there are quite a few what look like holes in the PCB. These two specific diagonally offset holes at the top here are the ones you gotta go for. So when you're putting your switches in, you'll notice that the plate mounted switches have these two copper pins that are diagonally offset from each other. So notice on the switches, which again are plate mounted switches, there are two diagonally offset copper pins. These pins need to line up with the two diagonally offset holes on the PCB. So if you look at the switch, which in the version we have, you can see kind of a little bit of the internals of the switch. There's this clear plastic around it. There's a little copper place that sits up and everything. This is directly above the pins. So what that means is that when we're putting the switches in, at least in our case here, the copper face, the little copper piece there is going to be facing me. If you're looking at it from the right angle as if you were sitting down to use this board, it would be the copper pin, or the copper plate is at the top, so to speak. Right. Anyway, so let's just get started with putting them in. It's a very, very simple process. All you do is make sure you're aligned. We are, and as I said before, the copper piece is facing me. So it should go here, the escape key at first, and then you just gonna have to drop it in, then push down till you hear it click. And that's it. It might require more force than you're expecting at first, but don't be afraid to push down until you hear that clicks. Alright, so say for whatever reason, you need to take a switch out. Maybe you're deciding to switch switches, or you're having issues with the switch and you're going to replace it or whatever. These are fairly simple to take out. So what you do is, if you notice on the little tool that you're provided, the switch puller, both ends are curved. Both ends are curved inward and facing towards each other. So what you do is these little tabs are going to slot underneath two little pinch switches, I guess you would describe them, on the switch, and that will unlock the switch, so to speak, from the PCB and allow you to pull it out. So with your little switch puller, make sure the little tabs get underneath these little pinch switches, and then you just try to pinch and pull out. And then boom, the switch is removed.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah. Don't be afraid if, a couple of them come out damaged. Like you might use too much force and collapse the plastic in, but yeah. Or in my case, what's happened to me before when pulling them out is I've bent some pins before. All right, so yeah, we're just gonna begin the process of putting all the switches in. It's kind of a tedious process, but at the same time also kind of zen. So maybe just chill out to some music or something. The keycaps that I've chosen is from mechanicalkeyboardsfan.com, which is a shop out of China. This came all the way from essentially Shanghai, which if you've been keeping up with the weather lately has been kind of brutal. So got delayed a little bit due to the typhoon that hit Shanghai over the past weekend. But these are the Sakura Keycaps from mechanicalkeyboardsfan.com, and they are an absolutely gorgeous set of keycaps, and they are PBT, which is a really good material. It feels really nice against the fingers, kind of the sort of matte, rough, textured finish to it. And it is also dye sublimated, which means that it's not going to feel inky on all the keys that have, a lot more of an intricate design than others. So here they are. Alright, switches are in, the keycaps are on, this board is now done, ready, usable. All I have to do is plug it in and you're good to go. Glorious has their own little open source software that you use to control all the RGB, because this board of course has RGB, because what things don't have RGB now, right? Anyway, one primary issue that I had while building the board, and this is something you might run into too, the pre-installed goat stabilizers are lubed the shit out of the factory, okay? So you might notice spacebar, not as springy, right? Backspace, not as springy. Actually, that ship's okay. Enter, not as springy either as, you know, just a regular keycap. And it's kind of weird that they're having the problem of over-lubing now that these have sort of gone into a larger production scale. Because if you look at some of the batch 1 or like pre-release models and everything they sent out to like more like typing influencers and whatnot, then one of the criticisms they had was that the GOAT stabilizers weren't lubed enough, and now they're over-lubed, so Lori just kind of needs to meet in the middle and, you know, just appropriately lube the stabilizers. There are a couple ways around this though. They will break in over time, especially if you're a heavy typer and everything. It'll only take a day or two if you're writing a lot and everything, so these will break in, the lube will dry up, get spread out, etc. But if you want to go for the fix it now option before you start typing with it, then it's going to require you to disassemble the keyboard entirely to get to where these stabilizers are mounted to, and you might have to take away the little pads, the little sort of acoustic dampening pads that they gave us samples of too, also in the bots, or spares of in the bots as well. So, yeah. But anyway, with that, I think that's going to wrap up the video. Overall, the build came out really, really well, and it was very, very easy to build on. And I would, again, recommend this to anyone who's looking to build their first mechanical keyboard, just as a sort of introduction to, you know, parting things out just a little bit. Anyway, so again, thank you all so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever we post a video. We try to post twice a week here. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at tech_4_thought and Instagram now at tech_4_thought. Now, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.